Le pourquoi est trop grave.
All right, let's be real for a second. Who gets to tell the story? Who decides what gets highlighted and what gets left out? Whose voices are amplified and whose are silenced? These questions are crucial in understanding the power dynamics at play. These aren't just academic questions, they're about power dynamics, especially when it comes to how the media shapes our understanding of the world, particularly places like the Middle East. The media has a significant role in framing our perceptions. We're constantly bombarded with images and narratives about Islam and the Muslim world. These images are not just pictures, they are powerful tools that shape our thoughts and beliefs. Often these narratives are filtered through a lens of fear, suspicion, and frankly, ignorance. This lens distorts reality and creates a skewed perception. The result? A distorted picture that fuels prejudice and misunderstanding. This distorted picture is not just a minor issue, it has real-world consequences. It's like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube but only ever seeing one side. You might think you're making progress, but in reality, you're missing the bigger picture. You might make some progress, but you'll never get the full picture. The full picture requires seeing all sides, understanding all perspectives. To understand the complexities of the Middle East, we need to break free from these one-sided narratives and engage with diverse perspectives. This means listening to voices that are often marginalized. So, how do we even begin to untangle this mess? It starts with questioning the sources of our information and seeking out alternative viewpoints. Well, let's start by listening to voices that challenge the dominant narrative, voices like that of Father Elias Zala. By doing so, we can begin to see the world in a more nuanced and accurate way. This is not just about fairness. It's about getting closer to the truth. Engaging with diverse perspectives enriches our understanding and helps us build a more inclusive and informed society. It's a continuous process of learning and unlearning. So, let's commit to this journey of broadening our horizons and embracing the richness of multiple narratives. Only then can we hope to truly understand the world around us.
Father Elias Zala is a Catholic priest from Damascus, Syria. He has dedicated his life to serving his community even in the face of unimaginable adversity. He's lived through the Syrian war firsthand, witnessing the devastation and human cost of conflict. The streets he once knew so well have been transformed by the ravages of war, yet he remains a steadfast pillar of hope for those around him. But Father Zala's perspective goes beyond the headlines. He sees the human stories behind the statistics, the faces behind the numbers. His experiences have given him a unique insight into the complexities of the conflict.
The West, particularly its media, has often portrayed the conflict in a very simplistic manner. They focus on the most sensational aspects, often missing the deeper, more nuanced realities. They make it seem like a spontaneous uprising or a clear case of good versus evil. This black and white portrayal fails to capture the true nature of the conflict, but the reality is far more complex. The Syrian war is a tangled web of historical grievances, political maneuvering, and international interests.
Father Zala argues that the Syrian war wasn't simply a spontaneous uprising or a case of good versus evil. He believes that understanding the conflict requires looking at the broader geopolitical landscape. He points to deeper, more troubling factors at play, including foreign interference and a deliberate strategy to destabilize the region. These elements have played a significant role in shaping the course of the conflict.
There are deeper geopolitical strategies at work, strategies that go beyond the immediate conflict. These strategies are often driven by external powers with their own agendas. Strategies that aim to destabilize the region for external benefits. These actions have far-reaching consequences, affecting not just Syria, but the entire Middle East. This is not just my opinion. It aligns with a controversial document known as the Yinon Plan. This plan, which dates back to the 1980s, outlines a strategy for the fragmentation of the Middle East.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. A Catholic priest talking about a plan to destabilize the Middle East. It might sound far-fetched, but it's important to consider all perspectives. A Catholic priest talking about a plan to destabilize the Middle East? Sounds a little out there, trust me, I get it. But Father Zala's insights are grounded in his lived experiences and deep understanding of the region's history. Sounds a little out there, trust me, I get it. But hear me out, because this is where understanding the historical context is crucial. Without this context, it's easy to fall into the trap of oversimplification. But hear me out, because this is where understanding the historical context is crucial. Father Zala's perspective challenges us to look beyond the surface and consider the deeper forces at play. By doing so, we can gain a more comprehensive understanding of the conflict and its implications for the future. In 1982, Oded Yinon, an Israeli strategist, authored a report that outlined a plan for achieving Israeli regional superiority. This plan, often referred to as the Yinon Plan, proposed a strategy of deliberately fueling sectarianism and internal conflicts within Arab states, effectively dividing and weakening them from within.
It's important to note that the Yinon Plan is not some officially sanctioned Israeli policy document. However, its ideas have been deeply influential, particularly among certain hawkish circles.
The plan's chillingly accurate predictions about the rise of sectarian violence in the region, particularly in Lebanon and Syria, have led some to believe that its principles have been subtly at play in Western foreign policy.
I see the Syrian war through this lens. External forces have exploited existing tensions within Syrian society to further their own geopolitical interests. The Western media, however, has largely ignored this aspect of the conflict, instead presenting a simplified narrative that pits a brutal dictator against freedom-loving rebels.
Section 4. Painting a false reality. The Western media's portrayal of Islam. This brings us to a larger issue: the Western media's often skewed portrayal of Islam and the Muslim world.
For decades, Western media outlets have presented a largely monolithic and negative image of Islam, often associating it with extremism, violence, and oppression. This biased portrayal isn't accidental. It's the result of deliberate choices about what stories to cover, how to frame those stories, and whose voices to amplify.
The constant bombardment of images showing violence in the Middle East, coupled with a lack of nuanced reporting on the region's history, culture, and diversity, has created a climate of fear and suspicion towards Muslims.
Think about it. How often do you see positive stories about Muslims in the mainstream media? Stories about Muslim doctors, teachers, artists, and activists who are making a difference in their communities. These stories rarely make headlines, reinforcing the false narrative that Islam is inherently incompatible with Western values.
Section 5. Beyond the headlines. Father Zala's encounters with compassion and faith. Father Zala's own experiences stand in stark contrast to this negative portrayal.
He speaks with warmth and admiration about his Muslim neighbors and friends in Damascus. He shares stories of their shared values, their acts of kindness, and their unwavering faith in the face of adversity.
He talks about how Muslims and Christians in Syria have lived together peacefully for centuries, their lives intertwined through shared traditions, cultural exchanges, and a deep respect for each other's beliefs.
He emphasizes that the sectarian violence that has plagued Syria in recent years is not a reflection of true Islamic values, but rather a tragic consequence of external manipulation and the pursuit of power.
Section 6. Deconstructing Muslim terrorism, a loaded term with dangerous implications. One of the most dangerous aspects of the Western media's portrayal of Islam is the widespread use of the term Muslim terrorism. This term is not only misleading but also harmful, as it unfairly stigmatizes an entire religion and its followers. The media's repetitive use of this term has far-reaching consequences that extend beyond mere words.
This term is deeply problematic because it creates a false association between Islam, a religion practiced by over 1.8 billion people worldwide, and terrorism, a complex phenomenon with a wide range of root causes. The vast majority of Muslims live peaceful lives adhering to the principles of their faith, which emphasize compassion, charity, and community. By labeling terrorism as Muslim terrorism, we ignore the diverse and rich cultural tapestry that makes up the Muslim world.
By constantly linking Islam with terrorism, the media creates a climate of fear and suspicion towards all Muslims. This pervasive narrative fosters an environment where Muslims are viewed with distrust and hostility, leading to social alienation and even violence against them. The impact of such a narrative is profound, affecting the daily lives of Muslims who are unfairly judged based on the actions of a few. This not only fuels prejudice and discrimination against Muslims, but also prevents us from having honest conversations about the real causes of terrorism, including political instability, economic inequality, and foreign intervention. These root causes are often overlooked in favor of a simplistic and sensationalist narrative that blames an entire religion for the actions of a few extremists. By doing so, we miss the opportunity to address the underlying issues that contribute to terrorism and to find effective solutions.
Father Zala argues that true Islam is a religion of peace, compassion, and justice. He emphasizes that the core teachings of Islam are centered around the well-being of humanity and the promotion of harmony among all people. According to him, the actions of a few misguided individuals should not define a religion that has a long history of contributing positively to civilization. He points to the countless verses in the Quran that emphasize the sanctity of life and condemn violence against innocent people. These verses are clear in their message that taking innocent lives is a grave sin and goes against the very essence of Islamic teachings. The Quran advocates for justice, mercy, and the protection of all human beings, regardless of their faith or background. He believes that the actions of terrorist groups like ISIS are a betrayal of true Islamic teachings, and that these groups should not be seen as representative of the vast majority of Muslims who are peaceful and law-abiding citizens. The overwhelming majority of Muslims around the world are engaged in building communities, fostering education and promoting peace. They are doctors, teachers, engineers, and artists who contribute to the betterment of society. It is crucial to recognize and celebrate the positive contributions of Muslims rather than allowing the actions of a few to overshadow the good